It started with the biggest pipe bomb the FBI had ever seen.
There is a bomb in Centennial Park. You have 30 minutes.
It ended in a dumpster after the largest manhunt in American history.
My knees knocked so hard that I was about to answer them. That's how nervous I was.
Eric Rudolph and the rise of anger.
Domestic terrorism has been metastasizing across the country for a long time now.
True story, true crime, true consequences for us all.
American Shrapnel, from award-winning journalists Becca Andrews and John Archibald, two-time winner of the Pulitzer Prize. Now available wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, 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 come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I am Stephen Means. That is Stefan Krajisnik, and that is Andrew Gillis. This is your post-game pod. Ohio State winning 70-0 over Grambling University. This is their second of 3 non-conference games, and this is their first of 2 non-conference games that are essentially pick your score type of games, which is fine, right? When you play Texas in week 1, I think everybody will be okay if Ohio State plays 2 games where they essentially just blow out the opponent. Julian saying 18 of 19 in this game for 306 yards and 4 touchdowns and an interception. Bo Jackson leads in rushing with 9 carries for 108 yards. AJ, 5 catches for 119 and 2 touchdowns, and then a bunch of other guys. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you guys the game plan that I literally just gave these two before we started the pod. Right now, as we are recording this pod, Michigan, Oklahoma is heading into halftime. There's 6 seconds on the clock as I'm speaking into this microphone right now. So more than likely, by the end of this pod, we're not going to have a winner of that game. And Stefan and I want to break down that game and what we learned about Bryce Underwood. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about all the young guys, everything else we learned that's not quarterback related about Ohio State in a 70-0 win where anybody who was healthy and in a jersey got a chance to play. And then tomorrow for the Monday pod, Stefan and I, the Leave No Doubt pod, are going to essentially be Julian saying Bryce Underwood conversations and a sprinkle of other things as we rewatch both of these games over the next 24 hours here. But we're going to keep it light and short. I sent out a survey to our texters, 614-350-3315. We'll use that a little bit to talk about things as a totality here. So let's start with the survey and then we'll get into the young guys. Stefan, what was your confidence in Matt Patricia as Ohio State's defensive coordinator before the season, scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest? Where do you think the Texters were before the season started?
Texters were probably, I would say, like 4 or 5. I was like around a 2 or 3.
Andrew?
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm going to say a 5, and then I was at a 2.
So the average for the Texters was 5.88, but 7 got 27% of the votes. I think everybody's between 4 and 7 for the most part. There's literally votes all the way from 1 to 10, but most of the people are between 4 and 7. Stefan, where are you at now, and where do you think the Texters are now?
I'm around probably like a 9 right now.
Andrew?
But I was probably like a 9 after the Texas game for what it's worth.
Sure. This game wasn't changing Matt Patricia's opinion unless somehow Grambling came out here and scored 25 points. But still.
Yeah, Grambling scores 14 points in 2 drives, and we're going, what's going on? Sure. So yeah, today really wasn't going to change anything for the better. So like it really, there was only one way to go down, and they pitched a shutout. So I mean, I'm at an 8. I feel really confident. I think with Matt Patricia, I'm not quite at 10 right now, as I'm sure some people are, and I'm not trying to sound overly negative, but I just think that he had one game where he had a couple of weeks and months to prepare for it.
Sure.
Let's see how he does on a week-to-week basis, and I think that's going to be really big. But the early returns, really, really good. About as good as you could get. Pretty much exactly as good as you could get. 7 points in 2 weeks.
So I'm going to let you lead this one first because we're going to do young guys on both sides of the ball. We did a video about this as well. And so, Andrew, this kind of leads the way for you to talk about Riley Pettijohn and the day he got to have against Grambling because he got extended amounts of time. I can't wait to see what his snap situation was, but he's registered with 2 tackles, a pass breakup, and he forced the fumble that he picked up and went and going for a scoop and score. What'd you think of Riley? This is the first, he's going to be on special teams, but this is the first time we got to see him be a college football linebacker. I thought he was awesome.
Yeah, I thought he looked pretty good. Ryan Day kind of singled him out. He mentioned him as somebody that he thought, I think the exact question was like, when you put in the backups, like who stood out to you? And Ryan Day mentioned Riley Pettijohn.
Mm-hmm.
He looked aggressive. I thought he runs well. I mean, you look at him, just kind of what he is. I know he came out of high school at, like 6'1", like 215. Right now on the Ohio State website, he's listed at 6'2", 231. I mean, that is a dude that has prototypical linebacker size. And, I think the interesting thing is, while it is important to keep in mind that a lot of these dudes are freshmen, I believe Riley Pettijohn was with the team when they were traveling to the Rose Bowl and they were traveling to the Cotton Bowl. Like, I think he was on those trips. So Riley Pettijohn has been with this team for almost a full year now. And I think you're starting to see the physical side of things roll through. And I think the mental side of things showed up today. Like, he was the number 42 overall prospect, and number 2 linebacker coming out of his recruiting class in 2025. So this isn't a, wow, look at this guy that came out of nowhere. This is no, he was one of the best linebackers in the 2025 class, and he's playing like it. I said in one of our videos afterwards, I would not be surprised if we get to the end of the year and if you had to draw up a 2 deep of the linebacking core, if it's Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles as your starting tandem, and then it's Peyton Pierce and Riley Pettijohn. Riley Pettijohn is a dang good linebacker. And I thought he looked pretty good today, and I'm interested to see him get into the game more. Maybe it's next week against Ohio. Maybe I know Minnesota hung 100 on some directional state university today, but maybe you can get up on Minnesota and maybe Wisconsin. You never know. Like some of those games might get kind of dicey for the other opponent, and if that happens, Riley Pettijohn might find himself in a game, and I think we could see him playing his way into the 2 deep.
I thought Riley Pettijohn was awesome. Steven, I'm actually going to correct you on that. The fumble he picked up was forced by Caden McDonald. He actually forced a fumble later that was recovered by Epi So Riley Pettijohn was all over the place, especially in that second half. So yeah, I thought he looked terrific. I thought the speed he played with was just impressive, and honestly, kind of like the presence of mind. The play he scored a touchdown on, it seemed like everyone in the stands, everyone in the press box, and everyone on the field outside of like 2 people thought the play was dead, and he had the presence of mind to see that was a fumble, pick it up, and take it to the house. So it seems like a super high IQ player for someone that's that young, but also just super athletic, super talented. I think if he's not already this team's 4th linebacker, he's definitely going to be by the end of the year. And I think he's a guy who could end up getting, playing time, late in the season, maybe in some important spots. So I like a lot of what I saw from Riley Pettijohn. He reaffirmed why we've heard so much about him this offseason, right? Like James Laurinaitis, Ryan Day, Matt Patricia, they've all spoken really highly of Riley Pettijohn for a true freshman, and we saw against Grambling State why.
He needs to be ready to start in 2026 because I think when they go home to Tech, there are going to be a lot of Texas guys in this game when Ohio State goes to Austin next year. The last time they had this many Texas guys who were all significant football players on the team, and they were in a situation where, oh man, it's like a thing. Like, oh, look at all these players Ohio State stole from Texas, and now they got to go back to Texas to show the world how many players they stole from Texas. It was in 2018 when they had J.K. Dobbins and Baron Browning and Jeff Okudah, highly rated linebacker, highly rated cornerback, highly rated running back. Oh, wait, is that what they're going to have when they go to Austin next year? Highly rated running back James Peoples, 5-star cornerback, and Devin Sanchez should have been a 5-star linebacker, and Riley Pettijohn. This story sounds really familiar. Dibs. Calling dibs on the Texas boys going back to Texas and showing the Longhorns, ha, you should have kept me home. I'm calling dibs on that story right now. Who on defense, Stefan, else did you see while both of our stories were written by the end of the 3rd quarter? Who else did you feel like kind of popped?
Well, I'm sorry to cut you off. I just need to jump in with Pettijohn too. Like, it's important to know, like, Arvell Reese, we've been talking about him for a year. he's draft eligible. It's like Sonny's going to the NFL and Arvell might be gone. It might not just be Riley Pettijohn needs to be ready to start because, he might be good enough to. It's, hey, there might be an opening there that there's 2 guys gone. And this is kind of like the Stefan, he talked out so much about him and then, he gets to see his guy move on after maybe just one season if Arvell Reese is that good. So yeah, it might just be there's a hole in the lineup chart.
Yeah, no doubt. I think there's a chance Ohio State loses both starting linebackers this offseason to the NFL. The guy on defense who I was really impressed with, and like when I say really impressed, like made a play and caught my attention just because they were rotating so many people. But I thought Zion Grady, the sack he got, I thought he looked good. He's a guy who also, I think, probably in that same vein of Riley Pettijohn, like Zion Grady could have a really big role for this team next year, right? Like we'll see what ends up going on, at defensive end and some of the changes that end up happening. But he's a guy who's got potential. Caden Curry spoke really highly of him when we talked to Caden postgame just about, the work the work that Zion has put in this offseason. You've got a lot of older guys, even though they're like newer in these starting roles at defensive end. And, if a few of them move on, there's starting roles to be had. And Zion Grady, I thought with his sack today kind of looked the part. He's just another dude who, like, I remember when we saw him the first time he was practicing with Ohio State, like he stands out physically. Like he's a guy who, you could see what Ohio State liked about, the tangible traits, I guess, when they were going through the recruiting process with him. So I thought him coming in there and getting a sack was impressive. I thought he played well. And he's a guy who's going to factor into this rotation. Probably not so much this year, but if he's not starting next year, I think he's playing a very important role for this team. And at the end of the day, you want him to be as prepared as possible. And I thought he looked the part, someone who in 2026 could be ready to go.
I also don't think there's not room for a young guy, one of these freshmen, as the season progresses to start pushing for more, even this year, right? I think the defensive line has been fine, but it hasn't necessarily gotten crazy pressure yet. Now it's only 2 games, right? And you're playing against two teams that have quarterbacks who can run a little bit, so you got to give it some time. If you tell me, you mentioned Zion Grady, I've been on the Zion Grady train since he got here back in January. You tell me a guy like that, a guy like Jarquez Carter, a guy like Episatanale, maybe it starts to click for them at some point in the middle of the season, because this is not the only time we're going to see those guys, because this is not the only time Ohio State's going to blow out a team. It's going to be the only time they beat a team 70-0, but it's not going to be the only time that they blow out a team this year. I'm always going to leave room for highly rated freshman defensive lineman, highly rated recruit freshman at a position that doesn't necessarily have bona fide stars yet, maybe peaking later in the season and maybe having a bigger role in November than he has right now. Let's change over to the other side of the ball. Andrew, what was your confidence level in Brian Hartline as Ohio State's play calling offensive coordinator before the season? And also, what do you think the Texans was?
That's an interesting one, because I feel like you might have asked me that. I feel like I was at like a 7 just because the talent might have been really good, and you can probably mask over some stuff. And I think the Texans were probably at like an 8. I think we were pretty simpatico on that one.
Mr. Krajisnik?
Yeah, I'd say it was probably around like a 7.5, 8, just because the big reason why all these weapons are on Ohio State and why their offense has so many weapons is he's responsible for it. And after a couple games, I'm probably around the same. Like I'd probably say like a 7 or an 8.
0.3.
Yeah, I was going to say the Texans are probably around that same area.
Yeah, 6.36 was the average. 27.88% of the votes were a 7, and the bulk of the votes were between a 4 to an 8. I think there's an expectation with the offense that maybe it's just too good to fail. And so because of that, you can have more confidence in Brian Hartline. Where are you at now, Stefan, and where do you think the Texans are now?
And now I'm probably, I think me and the Texans probably both around like 8.
Gillis?
Yeah, that sounds right.
With votes anywhere, like 26.57% of the votes were at 8, but the bulk of the votes were between 6 and 10. I think a lot of people just think it's too good to fail. Had they not come out here, Stefan, and thrown it the way they did, and maybe given, again, Grambling State's not a good SWAC team, so maybe this example was just never on the table. But Arch Manning today against San Jose State, which I know is a significant step up, but it's still not a G5. It's still supposed to be his stat game, right? Cade Klubnik's messing around this week and throwing picks against Troy, right? Penn State, Drew Aller, they didn't look great against FIU. And again, I understand, like, of the talent levels, Grambling is still a level down, but there is a world that exists today where the offense takes a quarter and a half to get it going because they're just They look like they're in a rut and they're sleepwalking through the game. If they didn't do what they did today, let's just say they sleptwalked through the quarter and a half, and even if they won the game 49-0, would you start having concerns about Brian Hartline? Or mission accomplished today, they came out here and did exactly what they needed to do, and that's just throw it and make it look like Grambling has no chance of winning this game. They better win the Battle of the Bands at halftime.
Yeah, I guess I don't know how concerned I would have been with Brian Hartline. You know, like if they came out of the play calling was super conservative again or something like that, then I would maybe have some questions about Hartline. I think had the offense been slow, I maybe would have had some questions, about Julian saying of like, okay, you told us you could have put more on his plate, and you said you were being conservative, and that's why maybe he didn't play better. And now we're seeing it's like, oh, maybe it wasn't just the play calling that factor into it. But I think seeing them come out and throw the ball the way that they did and successfully throw the ball the way that they did, I think is super important. I talked about this on one of our videos of just when we talked about this passing attack, like the big play that Jeremiah has where it's just a blown coverage. And it's funny, I was just got some of the football games on my TV, and they were showing some highlights of the Texas game, and Texas, it looks like one of the deep plays for March Manning was kind of like the same exact play where like the guy coming over the top, just blown coverage. Like if all the plays were just like that, maybe you don't learn a ton. But Ohio State was aggressive in his play callings and kind of the different things they threw at Julian Sayin, and he consistently kept putting the ball in places where his receivers were the only ones who could make a play, and not just finding open guys, but even guys like I talked about in the video too. I love that throw that he made to Kasmerick for the first touchdown. Reminded me a lot of Will Howard's throw against Northwestern at Wrigley last year, where you're going over the middle, right over the top of the linebacker's head. It's like, I don't care if that's an all Big Ten linebacker or the worst linebacker on a SWAC team. Like, that's a body in the middle of the field that you got to throw it perfectly over his hands and his head to get the completion. And there was just a lot of that from Julian Sayin, where it's like, hey, if your guy's going to make a play, put it in this spot. And he was doing that. He did that against Texas, I think. Obviously, there were some drops, but I think he did that a ton against Grambling State, with the exception being an interception, obviously. But I thought, the play calling I thought was about what I expected, but, the execution was even better than I could have predicted. I mean, to only have one incompletion, for that to be on a, just a questionable decision, questionable pass, just, so it was just kind of off, with that to be the only exception, you walk away from this pretty good about, Brian Hartline, Julian Sayin, this receiving core, whatever it may be, right? There was obviously something off between Sayin and the receivers early on in that Texas game. And, you look at the drops and it's just, receivers got to make a play. But it did seem like at times the timing and the chemistry was just kind of off. And they corrected that against Grambling. And I thought the whole offensive unit, Brian Hartline included, looked pretty impressive.
Stefan, in our video, you mentioned Bo Jackson. So this is your... I don't know how we keep letting you claim all the Cleveland people, but we're here letting you once again claim the Cleveland guy. Even though, listen, Carlos Loughlin told us back in the spring to buy stock in Bo Jackson, and he ends up with 9 carries for 108 yards and a touchdown, including a 51-yard run. He also, I'm blaming him for why we ended up being wrong. We all picked 63-0, and we were in good graces to do so. And then Mr. Bo, ends up running a 51-yarder on 3rd and 3, which put Ohio State in the position where it was inevitably going to score. Sam Williams-Dixon got the 1-yard touchdown. Did you see what you needed to see from Bo Jackson today in a world where we knew we weren't going to see him against Texas? But now it's time to start ingratiating him into this with James Peoples and CJ Donaldson.
I thought the stat line for Bo Jackson was perfect to describe what Bo Jackson can give to this team. As you mentioned, nine runs for 108 yards. We're looking at an average of 12 yards a carry. Like that's what this guy brings to Ohio State's running back room, and why I've continued to say a lot this offseason of the running back workload might be a 1A, 1B with James Peoples and CJ Donaldson, but there is going to be a third guy, Bo Jackson, who factors into this. He is going to factor into this offensive attack more than James Peoples did last year as the third running back. Bo has that explosiveness trait, maybe like has more of that explosiveness trait than the other two guys ahead of him on the depth chart. Now, that like CJ Donaldson gives you a ton. He's great. He's turned out to be a pretty great all-around back for you, especially with the work he did in the offseason of getting his body right. And, he's an experienced guy. James Peoples, I think all three of us still think very highly of him and what he can do. But there's an element of explosiveness that Bo Jackson brings that's different from those two guys. And there are going to be games this season where Ohio State needs that, right? Like, you need someone to break a big play for you. Again, I said in one of our videos, like, he's the type of player they probably could have used in the Texas game, but it's week 1 and he's a true freshman. And that's a massive game, and you can't put him out there in that situation. Totally get that. But if that Texas game if they meet again in December or January and that game's playing out the same exact way, he's a guy who could break something for you. Maybe similar to the way that, Travion Henderson was able to break open that Cotton Bowl a bit with his touchdown before the half. So I like a lot of what I see from Bo Jackson. I like them in practice too, but to take from Ryan Day and what he tells us all the time, it's like when you're not going full go in practice in terms of tackling, it's hard to learn a lot about your running backs. And seeing him go against 11-on-11 competition, I think we were able to see kind of everything on full display of what Bo Jackson brings you. And I think that's really exciting for Ohio State. I just think that explosiveness, there's just going to be so many instances where you could use that. And I'm excited to see how Ohio State does use that, because he showed to you that he's ready to play, and he's ready to play some important reps for you this season. Like, this might not be a wait too long type of thing until he's making impact plays. Like, I would not be surprised. Maybe, Washington is your first true road game, so maybe you're still a little bit safer in terms of who gets to take the field for you. But like Minnesota, I don't think it's fourth quarter garbage time when we see Bo Jackson. I think it might be second quarter, third and 8, you bring him in and see what you can do. So I like the idea of Bo Jackson a lot. And now I like the tangible part of Bo Jackson, not just the idea, but like what we've seen, because what we thought is what it looked like against Grambling State. And that's a guy who could change some games for Ohio State down the road, maybe even this season. So I loved what I saw from him. That 50-yard run was impressive, because we were down on the sideline, Stephen, and we were, looking up, watching on the video board because it's happening on the far side. And like, you just see him break that. I didn't think anyone was going to get to him. I was really surprised when he got tackled, because once he got into some open space, that dude's moving.
I've never cheered in a press box. I will never cheer in a press box. I was not in the press box, and I wasn't cheering. I was upset. I was ready to be right. Let me tell you, Andrew, how ready to be right I was ready for all of us to be. I had screenshotted all of our predictions, and I had the tweet up on Twitter ready to go. Congratulations, guys. We did it. Apparently, Doug and Bill over at the Bill and Doug show also picked Ohio State to win 63-0. So we were about to have the cleveland.com family, past and present, all pick 63-0. And we were 51 yards away from being correct. And then Bo Jackson had to be good at football.
Yeah. First off, that would have been great. Just
a Cleveland guy betrayed cleveland.com.
Well, he actually, after that, did his part, because he was soon after that got a run and got hit out of bounds. And I think like the ball came loose, maybe at like the 2-yard line. And then Lachlan said, all right, Sam Williams-Dixon time.
But then, no, there was also, they ran it in and got a penalty. So it got taken off the board again. So Ohio State just hates us. That's what this is.
The thing that I like about Bo Jackson that I was kind of thinking of is, you're right. Like, I don't think we're at like Travion speed. I don't think we're at, that level, but he just might have the biggest burst in the running back room. I don't know. Maybe the most juice, maybe the most shake. I don't know what word you want to use to describe it, but like, he is the type of running back to where he kind of bucks the trend. When Ohio State played Notre Dame in 2023, like in South Bend, Ohio State didn't run the ball worth a squirt. And then guess what happened? Travion Henderson had a 61-yard run. He broke one of the sideline, and he scored a touchdown. And you know what? If you go back and go, well, if you take away the 61-yard run, he really didn't run the ball all that well. Same thing for Jeremiah Love last year in the playoff. I remember that was like a thing with when they played Indiana. He had a 98-yard touchdown run, and then he had like 10 yards the rest of the game. And I know he was hurt, but it was like, well, actually, Indiana stopped Jeremiah Love the whole game, except for that one thing that changed the game. And that is the interesting part about this, right? So I think, there is a lot to be said for, those situations where it's like, hey, man, you had 15 carries for, 34 yards on every other carry that you had, but you had a 70-yard house call. And you 9 carries, 108 yards, 51 is a long. Like, you take away the 51, he still has a really, really impressive day. But that to me is what you can get. Like, I'm not saying I believe this. I just want to be, I just want to present a scenario. And that scenario is Ohio State's not a good running team. Let's just pretend that there's a world where you get to Big Ten play and you're in November and Ohio State's not a good running team. They're not getting push in the interior. They're not hitting the sideline well, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, Bo Jackson might be the guy that if you put him in and he hits a toss play, a stretch play, he finds a gap in the middle and then hits the sideline, he might be the guy to break that and to give you something that maybe CJ Donaldson or James Peoples doesn't, where, maybe they have if it's a play up the middle, maybe they have a 6-yard gain. Jackson might find 40. And if it's a, play to the outside, maybe they don't get to the corner and Bo does. And Bo knows long runs, I suppose. And, that to me is really the interesting part about this, because when you talk about Ohio State's running back room, it's just not going to be as good this year, I don't think, as what it was last year. Last year was such a high bar, but you might have a 3-headed monster that can give you a couple of different things. And Bo Jackson might give you maybe one of the more important elements of that running.
Gillis, who's your offensive guy?
Am I allowed to talk about Bo Jackson some more?
For a dude who mentioned Ian Moore earlier this week.
Yeah, you know what? The offensive line is tough to kind of evaluate in game because, you got to go back and look. So I do want to go at.
That's fair. Okay, you wrote about Lincoln, so maybe this is where we can talk about Julian Sands, this team's starting quarterback.
Yeah,
and I think he just spent the last 2 weeks checking off some serious boxes on what we needed to see from Ohio State starting quarterback. Julian Sands gets abducted by aliens in the middle of the second quarter against Washington. Did you see enough from Lincoln Kienholz today that you feel confident that he can keep it's not about ceiling, but the floor of what this offense is with Julian remains the same, that he can get them through, that he can do essentially what Devin Brown did in Ohio State's first road game in the Big Ten last year when they played Michigan State? Did you see enough from Lincoln Kienholz today to make you feel confident about that? And 6 of 7 for 71 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, I think so. You mentioned it, the ceiling. I mean, Julian, 18 or 19, 306, 4 touchdowns. I really wish that wasn't a pick, because we could, now we're saying, now you have to say, I don't know how you could do much better. And he threw an interception. So it's oh man, I could see how that, whatever. Julian was unbelievable. He was really, 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 really good. And I think you saw enough from him today to where you go, yep. If certain things come together, which are in his control, some of them, and if certain things are not in his control come together, he's going to be in Times Square in December. And he's going to be competing for the most prestigious award in college football. And that's totally fair with him. Lincoln, the ceiling is not there. I just don't believe it is. If Julian Sand were to say, hey guys, I want to play baseball, actually, and he just decides, and he's done tomorrow. I don't think Lincoln Kienholz has that New York Heisman ceiling, but I do think that what you saw today was dependability. I think you saw consistency. I thought he went through his reads well. You saw some shake. He had a nice 8-yard run to where, we've kind of hypothesized a package for him in the red zone, a package for him in the goal line. We've kind of talked about different things that you could add with Lincoln Kienholz. And basically, like you said it, if you put Lincoln Kienholz in the game, what do you want? Somebody to drive the car and not crash into the guardrail.
Right.
And especially with this offense. And I think you saw that. And that's what you want out of a third-year quarterback. So, yeah, look, it's Grambling State. I don't care if Grambling State had their starters in and Lincoln Kienholz was playing with the scout team. You should be able to move the ball a little bit. And I thought he did. So we'll see what he can do. Maybe he gets in the game against Ohio if they go up big enough.
I think he should.
If they get, if it's a clean game offensively and it's 38-0 going into the fourth quarter, then sure, we'll see. But there are other games to where you would like to see him maybe compete against the defense. But there's not a ton that you saw from Lincoln that you go, that's not great. That was a poor decision, or that was a bad read, or he looked uncomfortable. And I think it's a look thing. And from what you would want out of a backup quarterback against Grambling State, you saw it.
I think if they can get 30 snaps out of Lincoln Kienholz between these two games, I think that's success. I think that is, you get enough to get your QB ready where if you needed him in a pinch, you could use him in those situations. Okay, let's take our break. And I have 2 more questions I want to ask Stefan and Andrew before we get out of here and continue to watch Michigan, who at the time we're taking this break, it's a 7-7 game because Justice Hands just ran for 75 yards.
14-7.
14-7? Okay, I'm sorry. I don't have the score up because ESPN keeps taking it down every time they go to a replay. 14-7 early in the second half, Michigan. But we're here to talk about Ohio State right now, and we'll continue that when we come back from the break.
Tronary
Ares has arrived.
I would like you to meet Ares, the ultimate AI soldier.
He is biblically strong and supremely intelligent.
You think you're in control of this? You're not.
On October 10th.
What are you?
My world is coming to destroy yours, but I can help you.
The war for our world begins in IMAX. Tron Ares, rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. Only in theaters October 10th. Get tickets now.
Claptrap here. 2 big things are coming this fall. Borderlands 4 and Spotify Wrapped. So stop listening to that one playlist that reminds you of your ex who only made you cry. Talking about you, Veronica. And pre-order Borderlands 4, coming out September 12th.
Rated mature.
Breathe deep. Imagine your legs more limber in Duluth Trading Double Flex Denim. Envision euphorically squatting for that can of suds, bending for your toolbox in a state of bliss, lunging for your laser level on a whole new level. Relax and allow the flex to fill you with ability. Find your inner flex in Double Flex Denim only at Duluth Trading.
Talk about stepping up! Bang! Bang! It's time to level up your game. Introducing the all-new ESPN app. All of ESPN, all in one place. Your home for the most live sports and the best championship moments.
The electricity is palpable.
Step up your game with no annual contract required. It's the ultimate fan experience. Level up for more on the ESPN app or at stream.espn.com. Sign up now.
And we're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Stefan Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis after Ohio State's 70-0 win over Grambling State. Now 2-0. They're going to hold on to that number one ranking. You just spanked the team 70-0 in a world where there are some other teams around the country playing in equally talent, not equated games across the country. There's not going to be a new number one, and there shouldn't be a new number one anytime soon as long as Ohio State keeps doing what it's doing. I have two questions.
Well, we have to make sure we acknowledge another good loss by the SEC. Florida, good loss. Good South Florida team.
Yeah.
Good South Florida team. That's a good loss for Florida.
Yeah, I lied, actually. ESPN's going to be making the case tomorrow for South Florida to be the number one team in the country. I'm sorry, I forgot.
South Florida does have like a top 10 resume in college football, though.
They should be in the top 10.
I gave Stephen a hard time on the sideline because he was talking about, where he was going to rank South Florida in his AP poll. And I agree with him. Like, this South Florida team is actually pretty good. They beat Boise, they beat Florida. He was talking about moving them up in his rankings, but literally his immediate reaction to the Florida loss was South Florida's good. I'm like, you're doing the SEC thing. You're doing the SEC thing where it's that's a good loss though. That's a good loss though. No. South Florida proved that they're a good team, but in the same vein, we can also say that Florida, you can't be doing that at home. Billy Napier, it's over, Mike.
Yeah, South Florida was just the better team, period. I don't care what conference you were in. That's how you should do your voting. Two questions, one of which has to do with the game we are currently trying to watch and do this pod right now. I almost wrote this before the game, but I wrote it at the buzzer of like, oh, kudos for you, Ohio State. You took care of business. Now you can go hate watch the Michigan-Oklahoma game. And it's this idea of there's two things at stake here. There is watching the Big Ten beat another SEC school because the Big Ten and the SEC play each other 3 times during the regular season. Ohio State beat Texas last week 14-7. Right now, Michigan and Oklahoma are in a 14-7 game as the time where we're recording this early into the second half. And then Alabama is going to host Wisconsin. I think that game's next Saturday. So 3 straight weeks of Big Ten SEC. If Michigan wins tonight, the worst the Big Ten can do is 2-1. If they lose, then there's a tiebreaker between Wisconsin and Alabama. And I think at the beginning of the season, we all would have probably agreed, Alabama's going to win that one. So that's at least one win for the SEC. I don't know who's going to win that one now because maybe both of those teams aren't very good. The other side of that is just seeing Michigan lose a football game. But regardless of that, regardless of which side you stand on, this game is about finding out what type of threat Michigan is. They are a threat. Ohio State's lost 4 in a row. They're a threat regardless. But seeing how much of a threat they are, I think we were going to learn just as much about Bryce Underwood in this game as we spent the last 2 weeks learning about Julian Sand. One had their stat game last week. One had their stat game this week. One had their top 20 matchup last week. One is having them this week. I like how that worked out. Stefan, what do you think is more important to our texters? 614-350-3315. The question was posed, what is more important in your hate watch for the Oklahoma-Michigan game tonight? Seeing Michigan lose a game, period. Watching another Big Ten team beat someone from the SEC. Tell me who you think our texters picked and what you think the percentage breakdown was.
I imagine 80% of our texters picked Michigan to lose, or like would rather watch Michigan lose.
Okay. Andrew, you're in agreement of that?
Over 90.
Okay. It's in the middle of both of you. 84% said seeing Michigan lose, period, to 16% watching the Big Ten team beat someone from the SEC. Was that obvious? Should I even have asked this question?
In terms of like a generality, I think that was obvious. If you were to ask, like, if the question was posed a different way, I think you could get a different answer, because I think at this point, Ohio State fans know, like, Michigan not looking great and losing to Oklahoma doesn't impact the game in November too much. That's its own thing at this point.
If Ohio State had handled business last year, do you think it would have been maybe a little bit closer?
Maybe, yeah.
I think it's a reflection on the difference between the South and the Big Ten. The South does they buddy, right? They can see the bigger picture. In the Big Ten, they don't care about the bigger picture. Especially, and that's also what makes this the biggest rivalry in sports, because there's no scenario. As much as Ohio State fans want to stick it to the SEC, there is no scenario where they are putting their odds with Michigan to the side in the name of waving the Big Ten flag.
I think where Ohio State's a little bit of the exception too is, like, Ohio State can always say, well, we're Ohio State, like, we'll take care of the SEC ourselves. Whereas, like, Tennessee, if you're 9-3, you want to get into the playoff, you need the rest of your conference to help you out. Whereas Ohio State, it's like, if you're 9-3, you can still be like, we're Ohio State.
Sure. But I think if this was Auburn, Alabama in this situation, I think Auburn would be going SEC. I think Auburn would be going SEC. I do not think that there were Michigan fans who were cheering on Ohio State to beat Texas last week.
No. And I think one of my favorite genres of Ohio State fan are, like, obviously there's the people who say, I hope Michigan goes 0-12 every year. I hope they never win another game.
Sure.
But my favorite, I think, is the people who go, I hope, and this was maybe more of a thing in the 14 playoff era in the BCS than it is now, but the people that would go, I hope Michigan goes 11-0 to start every year. But they're not doing it to wave the Big Ten flag. They're not doing it to say, go blue and, I hope the Big Ten gets 8 people in the playoff and blah, blah, blah. You know what they're doing it for? To say, because when we beat those SOBs, it's going to maximize their pain. That's why they do it. The SEC is like, if, I'm an Ole Miss fan, and if Florida's really good this year, hip, hip, hooray. No, I kind of love that from Ohio State fans.
Well,
no, I do.
Go ahead. I was going to say, it used to be you want them to be 11-0 and then you beat them and end their season. Now it's like you want them to go 14-3 and the 3 losses are to you.
Yeah. And I think that, again, that hammers home the difference here between we can never be teammates. We are never putting our pride to the side for if the SEC getting the win over the Big Ten also means Michigan has a loss on its record, so be it. The bigger picture doesn't matter, because the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry is the bigger picture. Everybody turned off the Ohio State Grambling game 70-0 and immediately turned this on and started hate watching. I don't know if Texas is viewing this the same way when it comes to Oklahoma and the Red River rivalry. Were there Oklahoma fans last week who were hate watching Texas, or were they hoping Texas won because of the SEC? And I like that. I liked that 84% of our voters were probably like, this is a stupid question, Stephen. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? No, we want them to be 0-11, because then that 12th loss is like putting them in the coffin. Like, we either are the reason, Andrew, you can't do anything else even though you were 11, or we put the final nail in the coffin and danced on your grave.
Ohio State fans want maximum pain for Michigan at all times, and Michigan fans want maximum pain for Ohio State fans at all times. And the fun part is, there's more than one way to do that. And there are people that think that there's a lot of different ways to go about accomplishing that.
And there's no putting that aside to be a good teammate for your conference. And I love that. We need more of that. We have a lot of solidarity. After the game today, the Grambling and Ohio State bands, where they played for like another 30 minutes just for anybody who stayed, and it was awesome. That's great. That's where you show sportsmanship and you show respect for your opponent. You show respect for your opponent in the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry by always maximum hate at all times. They want Bryce Underwood to look like what Arch Manning looked like last week, but like 10 times worse than that. And I
think we learned the worst case scenario for Ohio State's Michigan is people stay on the field longer than they need to after the game.
And then people get pepper sprayed. Yeah. Let's not do that again. Let's not do that again.
By the way, Brutus, we saw you plant the flag before the game today. We saw it. That's a felony. It's a felony.
Stefan goes, that's a felony. That's a felony. And I saw a lot of tweets where people were like, Jay, which I thought was awesome. Last question, because Ohio's not a threat unless your name is Rutgers or West Virginia, apparently. Technically, Ohio and Ohio State have the same amount of FBS wins right now. So
true. And Power 4 wins.
Yeah.
Parker Navarro might be the fourth best quarterback on Ohio State's schedule. Just tossing that out there.
That's a pod for a later day. We're trying to get out of here.
How many times did Rich Rod lose to Ohio State? I can do some research. Hang on. Probably. Yeah. Buckeye Talk. Always ready to go.
Sure. I don't know if we need that research right now. But, okay. Here's my question. Because they're going to play Ohio next week and then go to a bye week, and then we're going to head off in the Big Ten play. I asked our texters this question as well, and I included the games where I actually felt like you could make a case that this team is a threat right now. So Rutgers, UCLA, and Purdue don't count as such. So I included essentially all the other Big Ten games on their schedule. So it's at home against Penn State, it's at home against Minnesota, on the road against Illinois, Washington, and Wisconsin. Like games where it's, even if you're not expecting a loss, you could paint the picture in your head on what it looks like, even if 85% of the reason is Ohio State didn't show up to play. Those 5 teams, Penn State, Illinois, Washington, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. Andrew, rank them based on their threat level 1 through 5. And this is obviously non-Michigan level threats.
Washington, Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin, Penn State. Penn State's 1.
Okay.
I think Illinois is 2. I understand the box score was probably a little misleading. Obviously, I didn't watch that game today, but everything I read about it kind of indicated that it was. But I still think Illinois is 2. I mean, look, I got to check Illinois' schedule, but they might be undefeated for that game. Washington 3, man, Minnesota 4, Wisconsin 5. Like, I'm sorry, like Wisconsin might just stink on ice. Like they just might not be all that good. I don't believe in their quarterback. I don't believe in what they're doing. And we're going to find out, I guess, on September 13th, a little bit earlier in the day when they play Bama. But right now, I'm putting Wisconsin.
Stefan, any changes to your order from that, or do you agree with Andrew?
Yeah, I think I might subscribe to the Stephen Means way of thinking. Of a young Ohio State team playing on the road against what's going to be an amped up Illinois crowd. I mean, even if they're not undefeated, they probably have their one loss would be Indiana. So like they're still top 20 team playing at home against Ohio State. Like that's going to be a tough environment to go into. And, you know, that's an experienced team that can maybe do some things. Whereas Penn State, like they don't have a history of beating Ohio State. So I'll go that route of Illinois 1, Penn State 2, Washington 3, and then I'll agree with Gillis at Minnesota 4, Wisconsin 5. Obviously, that Wisconsin game being on the road, the Wisconsin did look a little better week 2 than they did week 1. But I still think Minnesota's the better team, so I'll stick with Minnesota 4, Wisconsin 5.
Our Texans went Minnesota 5, and I think it's because that game is at home and Wisconsin's on the road, and it's back-to-back road games, so they went 4. But I don't think there's an issue either or with that order.
Ohio State, from a big picture schedule thing, has a really, really tricky stretch coming up. If you remember last year when Oregon struggled and escaped with a win at Wisconsin last year to stay undefeated, that was a stretch of like 8 straight games that Oregon had played without a bye, and the 8th game was a trip to Madison. And like Ohio State has this stretch coming up where it's going to be 3 road games in a span of 4 weeks, and it's like, you know, Illinois doesn't overly terrify you. Wisconsin doesn't overly, like Washington, Minnesota, none of those teams are like, you know, they're not close to the equivalent of like a Texas or, you know, anything like that we, you know, the team that Ohio State's already played. But like that idea of 3 road games in 4 weeks with a young team is tricky. Like I'm very open to the idea of one of those games being really weird. And like I think we anticipate maybe the Illinois game is close, but like would not surprise me if the game at Wisconsin was randomly close just because Ohio State's going through a really tough schedule.
They just had their mess around game last year against Nebraska. Teams do that in college football. They do mess around with teams they shouldn't.
And it was coming off of a bye week. Typically, Ryan Day has had his teams ready coming off of a bye week. But I think Washington is such a tricky... You guys all had Washington at 3. So did our Texers. They got 52.2% of the third place votes as well and 31.6% of the second place votes. I have Washington number 1 on my list because of where it is just on the schedule. This is Julian Sand's first time playing. This is going to be his first time throwing a pass, I believe, outside of Ohio Stadium, if I have that correctly. And you're coming off of a bye week after playing 2 games where Julian Sand gets to look invincible. And then all of a sudden, you're supposed to ramp that up another level. And maybe Washington's just kind of ready. And so they're a threat just because what if Washington makes some things shake for 30 minutes and now all of a sudden this is the 4-quarter game nobody expected to be. And Washington's going to be in a situation where if they can just get their best players to the 4th quarter and then try to throw a haymaker, that's how you get upset wins. And I think Washington, between Damon Williams and Denzel Boston, has 2 guys who, if you just get them to the 4th quarter, they can make some things interesting. I just don't believe in Penn State. I don't. I understand why everybody has them at number 1, though. Penn State got 81% of the first place votes. Illinois got 12% of the first place votes and 48% of the second place votes and 29% of the third place votes. Penn State got everything but a 4th place vote, which I think is interesting to me. Penn State's my 2 because you can't reasonably have them any lower than that. They're still the most talented team left on Ohio State's schedule. Even with what Michigan has, they're still probably the most talented team. And James Franklin does find a way to play things close. And he has Ryan Day's defensive coordinator from the past 3 years. So it's still an interesting game. I just don't believe in them to pull it out. But Washington, if they can just get to the 4th quarter with a young team that hasn't played on the road yet in the Big Ten, can that game get interesting? Maybe. So I had Washington, Penn State, Illinois, and then I'll join you guys, Minnesota, Wisconsin. I think if you want to put Wisconsin ahead of Minnesota because that game's on the road, I get it, but I think Minnesota is a better football team than Wisconsin is right now. But that's all it is. In 2019, after they played Nebraska, we were ready to call that team a super team. The problem was there were 2 other super teams that year, and somebody's got to lose football games, right? And as a result, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson are national champions, and Joe Burrow is, and they played Clemson while Ohio State lost in the semifinal. But there were 3 teams who all deserved to win a national championship that year. But the point is, after that Nebraska game, Doug, Nathan, and I were like, yeah, this is a super team. Nobody's beating them on their regular season schedule. We'll see you guys in either Phoenix or Atlanta. I think we get through that Washington game. If they get through that, I might be writing this team's a super team. We'll see you guys in Miami, and maybe they're playing the Hurricanes. 1-4-3-5-0-3315. Ohio State 70-0 to move to 2-0 on the season as the number 1 team in the country. As we're watching this, it's 14-7 still in the middle of the 3rd quarter with the Michigan game against Oklahoma. We're going to turn this off and go watch that, and then Stefan and I will talk about that and Bryce Underwood and Julian Sand and a lot more on the Monday Leave No Doubt pod, and then Tuesday we'll be back in the Woody talking with Ryan Day as they go through this all over again in another game that's probably going to be a bit lopsided, but there's at least things that I think Ohio has that can help us maybe talk about where this Ohio State team is headed, because it is at least an FBS team with some guys who can make something shake. 614-350, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. For Andrew Gillis and Stefan Krajisnik, I'm Stephen Means, and that was Buckeye Talk.